Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. This week's guest is Angela Shen. Angela is the founder and CEO of Savor Seattle Food Tours, and that's how I know Angela. Our paths crossed many years ago when we used to get together for these semi-regular brainstorming sessions, and there were probably a half a dozen or so of us, owners of local tour companies. And we would get together at a coffee shop or have breakfast every couple of months or so and talk through challenges that we might be having with our businesses. And others would have some great input. And I was always in awe of how focused and directed Angela was, and she still is, in terms of her business. And after getting to know her much better through this conversation, I can see why she is so impressive. Back then, I didn't know the backstory and kind of her background, but now it's just all making so much more sense. She has an academic background that's played a part in her success, but she's also really creative. And perhaps more importantly, she's got this passion for what she does. And her life goal really is just to inspire others. And that really comes through. During our Seattle Culinary tours, and that's through Wander Tours, we take this fantastic walk through Pike Place Market with one of her guides from Savor Seattle. And these guides are always just so much fun, and they're super knowledgeable. And I now get that they are either infused with Angela's energy or she has just the right radar to find people who are equally as passionate about food that she is. It all just makes sense. In this conversation, you'll hear about Angela's background growing up in this tiny town in Minnesota, and she's got these entrepreneurial immigrant parents. And so that's, as she says, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She knew that being an entrepreneur was her path, but she didn't just dive right in. She was really smart about it, and she figured out a way to gain as much knowledge as possible about business and branding before moving to Seattle and starting her own business. But as she was growing this business, all while being a wife and a mom to two kids, she had a health issue that pushed her over the edge and forced her to take a really honest look at her business. And she started to question what it was that made her happy. And I think that happens to a lot of people. They have a health issue, and then they start questioning things. And basically, she realized that working 80 hours a week was just not sustainable. She took a good look at her life and then made some decisions, which, it includes solo travel. And she made these decisions really about what it was going to take to be happy. And ultimately, she feels like 99% of people are going to look at some of those decisions and judge her for making them. And she knows for a fact that they do. And you'll hear about those. In other words, they're quite unpopular for a mom with two kids. And her take on this is really interesting. And I think it took a lot for her to come out and admit all this stuff. This is a really great episode in terms of that. Just a really wonderful conversation. What it comes down to is that she's going against numerous stereotypes, including what it means to be a woman, and a Chinese woman at that, and also a mother of two. I really admire Angela for having the strength to make these decisions in order to be her best self. Because if she's not showing up to be the best Angela that she can be, she's doing a disservice to everyone, and that's family, friends, and colleagues. I know you're really going to like this conversation. Before you listen to our chat, let me just tell you that if you're at all interested in traveling with me, such as coming on our Seattle Culinary Tour, you can check out all of our trips at wandertours.com. I lead many of these. It's my company. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually headed off to Ireland tomorrow as I record this. So by the time you're listening to this, I'll either be in the air or I will probably have landed in Ireland. We've got a number of women-only tours, including North India this fall and South India in early 2019. And then we've also got space on a few co-ed trips to Africa early next year. And that includes hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, a Tanzania safari, and gorilla trekking in Rwanda. And we're buttoning up details on those Africa trips now. So if you're interested, please let me know as soon as possible. We've got to get our hotel reservations in pretty darn quick here. So again, all of those can be found at wandertours.com. With that, please enjoy this conversation with Angela Shen. Before we started recording, you were talking about running and exercising. And I know because we used to get together in a kind of a mastermind travel group a number of years ago. And since that time, you have, if I can say, you've kind of transformed your body.
I have.
I was so delighted that I worked out this morning because when I was looking at your Facebook photos and I was like, oh my God, look at Angela. look at that body. Like there was a photo of you with your arms up. Yeah. And it was your back. And I was like, holy mackerel. So you look fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so you've really transformed. So just tell me, as we just kind of get a sound check here, tell me what your favorite form of sport or athleticism is right now.
Sure. So I do a combination of two things. I do high intensity interval training classes, typically about 3 days a week, and then running outside for 2 days a week. And you as a runner can totally relate, I'm sure, that with running, you are alone with your thoughts and you can't really run away from them.
Right.
You're running with them. Mm-hmm. And that to me is the perfect complement to my high intensity interval training classes, where during that hour, I can't think of anything else except for survival in that class, because that's the 1 hour someone else is the boss of me. It's
right.
liberating.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
Yeah.
Except for survival.
And that's 3 times a week?
3 times a week. And then I'm outside running where I have to be alone with my thoughts. and it's a good balance. And,
well, you don't have to be alone with your thoughts, though. So I listen to podcasts, and to a certain degree, I'm alone with my thoughts because there's a lot of thinking going on, but there's also a lot of ideas happening because they're spurred on by the podcasts that I'm listening to. It's like, oh, that's a great idea, because I'll listen to business podcasts or travel podcasts or whatever, health and wellness and that sort of thing.
So great.
But yeah, it is great. So you mix it up with weight training and that kind of thing, high intensity. And then you're running. And
running really changed my entire body. Mm-hmm. I'd been doing high intensity interval training classes, I would say, for a good 1.5 years. And my whole life, I just owned that I was short and squat and would be pear-shaped like my mother and her mother. And then when I started running, and I actually didn't think I would be able to do it, because last time I ran was for training for the Chicago Marathon 10 years ago. And after running that, my hips hurt, my knees hurt, and I thought, maybe I'm just not made for running.
Was it after you ran the marathon or during the training?
Both. And I just thought, well, it's not meant for me. And with high intensity interval training, I became very strong, but my body still looked the same. Mm-hmm. And with running, I couldn't believe that I became super lean. And then the muscles that I had been building with the classes, you could see them for the first time. So it just made me look like a totally different person.
Yeah.
And I loved how my clothes felt. It just changed everything for me.
Yeah. When I first started kind of really seriously running, what happened for me was I don't want to say they weren't like full-blown injuries, but I had some issues. I had like plantar fasciitis, and then I had an ITB issue with my right leg. And I think what had really motivated me was that I had already purchased tickets for Honolulu to do the Honolulu Marathon. And so I was like, there's no way that I'm not doing that marathon. And so I ran through some of the pain, and then I did a lot of physical therapy and a lot of foam rolling and stuff so that I would made sure that I was going to get to that marathon. But I think that a lot of people, what happens, just like what happened to you, is that they run and then they say, oh, this isn't for me because I got an injury, or they do a marathon and they get an injury. I was just talking to this woman, and listeners can go back and listen to this podcast, the episode with Sabrina Sayer, because she's a running coach. And she said, your body just needs to get used to what it's going through. And that's exactly it. So if you do 10 miles, and the first time you do 10 miles, your body's going to kind of hurt. And then the next time you do 10 miles, your body gets used to it. And then you just keep going. So if you keep with it, then just like you, then you get kind of used to it, even though that was a long time ago that you did the Chicago marathon. But now that you're back into it, now you miss it. You said that you've been out kind of for a while with an injury and you're dying to get back to it.
Yeah, 3 months of being benched from running due to overrunning during the Christmas holidays because I was traveling, and running is so accessible. So I made the mistake during those 2 weeks of, instead of my typical 2 days a week of running, I did that 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and then I didn't stretch, which I normally do.
Yeah.
And so I injured myself that first week running in really cold weather, not stretching. I was running in Minnesota. And then the following week, I went to Hawaii, and it's so beautiful. And so even though it hurt, I felt very compelled to keep running.
Yeah, of course.
I ran through the pain, and then I came back, and I thought, gosh, I should probably see somebody about this. And so I started PT, and they said, no more running, take a break. And that turned into 3 months. And then ultimately, I've come to the decision that I will just manage my pain level, because mentally and physically, what running does for me is so important. I need that outlet. I tried many, many other things, and I drank copious amounts of wine, and it's not enough. So I need this back.
Well, it's a little detrimental, some might say.
So I've been cleared to start running again. So I'm slowly building that back up. I never thought I'd be so excited to run 1 mile.
You know, as a person who didn't run their whole life, I told myself that I wasn't a runner, that now that I know that I can run, I'm so grateful. Every time I go out there, I'm just so excited. Like, people say, how do you get motivated? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a gift.
Totally.
I really believe that it's a gift.
Me too.
So happy
100%.
with it. Well, we are way off topic.
It's okay. That was fun.
That was fun. I know. So much more to say about that. What we're here to talk about today, though, is you. And I first want to hear about your business, Savor Seattle, because that's how I have known you over the years. So let's hear about your business, and then we'll kind of go back in time and talk about the evolution of that. So describe who you are and what you do with regards to your business.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. So my company, Savor Seattle, started 11 years ago, and it was born from this love of what food does to bring people together. My parents had restaurants all throughout my childhood, and I was always floored by all the different backgrounds of people that would come through the door. And you just serve them food, and it makes them connect on an entirely different level. It doesn't matter how old you are, where you're from, what native language you speak. Everyone speaks food. And I wanted to be able to bring that to life in an experience that was very accessible to people. So, Savor Seattle, what do? We offer guided food and drink tasting tours that explore what Seattle is known for. So we're looking at Seattle through the vantage point of our stomachs. So imagine in a 2-hour experience, we visit 5, 6, 7 different restaurants, eateries, give people a taste of what that place is known for, get to know the chefs, the owners, why they're so passionate about what they do, and along the way, learn a little bit about Seattle. So by the time we're done, it's a full meal.
And it's a huge lesson. It's a huge cultural and history lesson, too, because I've taken the Pike Place Market one numerous times, because at any time I have a group, a Seattle Culinary tour group here, we always do that tour, and it's so much fun. And then when we have family in town, too, we do it, because it's just great.
Especially for locals who may think, oh gosh, Pike Place is just a touristy place. I never go there. But really, when we have locals, and 40% of our customers are local, they're the ones that walk away from that experience, I think, stunned and floored, because they take all of that for granted. They're like, what? That isn't the very first Starbucks store? I've been telling people
I know.
my whole life. And so we're busting myths. And then these are places then that they can return to time and time again. And they get to play tour guide the next time. They have friends visiting and say, did you know that's not the first Starbucks store? It's really the fourth. So it's a lot of fun to be able to relive that history and share that with people.
I know. And it's really, I learned so much on that tour. Like you said, you think that Pike Place Market is a tourist, just a spot for tourists, but you go down there and you realize there's so much history and there's so many locals and it's the longest running public market in the United States. Is that right?
You learned that from the tour. Good job.
Of course I did.
Nice work.
I didn't even have to research. I remembered that. So that's, it is great. So you've been in business doing that for 11 years. And how has it evolved over the years?
When we first started, and that was right in Pike Place Market, I was leading tours by myself. We just had the one type of tour. And over the years, we've added on different walking tour experiences that explore other neighborhoods, different themes.
Chocolate.
Yep, exactly. Your teeth feel like they're wearing sweaters by the time you're done.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nope. Keeping warm. And we have a cocktail-themed one, a gourmet restaurant-themed one. But in recent years, what's been really exciting is to expand outside of Seattle. So we have a lot of repeat customers, just like with your tours. And we thought, how can we take this Savor Seattle guided experience, these 2 hours that they've had with us, transform that into
Italy,
yes. So we now offer 9-day food and wine tasting tours to Italy a couple times a year. We have 3-day, 2-night gourmet kayaking expeditions in the San Juan Islands. And so when we first started doing those and dabbling in them, that first year in the San Juan Islands, I think we did 1 trip. And this summer we're up to 7 or 8 departures.
Wow.
And same with Italy. I was so nervous when we started offering that, thinking, gosh, are we going to be able to fill seats? And this year we've got 2 nearly full trips going. They're small groups, and then we will always want to keep them intimate.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it's really amazing. People want to see and experience the world through food. It's such a big part of culture.
How many years have you been doing the Italy trip?
So the Italy trip, I think we're into our 3rd season now.
Where did you grow up?
Oh my gosh, I grew up in a small town outside of Minneapolis called Hopkins. My brother and I made up the entire minority population of our small town.
So are your parents immigrants?
They are.
What brought them to Minneapolis?
It's funny, as entrepreneurs themselves, the apple really doesn't fall very far from the tree. Someone told them, because they were in New York previously, that there were no Chinese restaurants in Minnesota. Therefore, it was a great business opportunity. So sight unseen, they moved from New York to Minnesota, and that's how I ended up growing up in Minnesota.
Yeah, you betcha. And so how did they pick that little place, though? Do you know?
I don't know. It was probably because it was affordable at the time.
So I know that, so they had a restaurant, but prior to that, as you were growing up, did you know that food was such a central part of their life, or was it a central part of their life? Or they just thought, oh, here's a business opportunity, let's go open a restaurant?
So my father was always a chef and was one in New York as well. And so moving to Minnesota, certainly not knowing anyone there, their best option was to try to start a restaurant, because that was a core skill set of my father's. And so I grew up quite literally. My first memories are of taking naps on storage shelves in the back of their kitchen. And my dad's favorite story to this day that he likes to tell is that she would just climb up there on her own and never fall off. So I still have a scar on my index finger.
When you did fall off.
No, actually from playing with fire, because you're in a kitchen all day. Yeah. What are you going to do? You're going to turn knobs and figure out how things work. So I grew up in a very busy kitchen and did every job under the planet in the food establishment. Got paid nothing as cheap child labor. And so as soon as I was old enough to get paid to do it for someone else and get paid. I did at 14 and started working in other restaurants.
What other restaurants?
There were just various small restaurants in Hopkins, Minnesota. And then when I went off to college, I was a server.
What did you study at college?
So I had concentrations in management and marketing. I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I knew I wanted to get trained under someone else's P&L first.
Right.
So I went to school in Philadelphia at the Wharton School. And when I graduated, I took a job in Chicago working in brand management at Quaker Oats.
Oh, wow.
So that's my background.
So that mixed the two. You were in the food industry, but you were working in marketing.
Yes.
What did you learn there?
Oh, my goodness.
How long were you there first?
I was there for almost 4 years, and I had the pleasure of working on brands like the Quaker Grits business. Didn't know what a grit was.
My family's from the South. I know grits well.
Well, now I do. So brands that are over 100 years old, like the Quaker oatmeal business, I got a chance to work on that and figuring out how to drive growth on a business that's 100 years old versus brand new brands like the Quaker Oatmeal To Go brand that then I rebranded as Quaker Breakfast Squares. It was an entirely different challenge. Flavor development, advertising, but really at the end of the day, it was about how do you manage a business from all angles. People think of marketing as just the glitzy, glamorous parts, the advertising and the coupons maybe, or the promotions. But really 98% of my time was spent on building budgets and figuring out the financial forecast for the following year, how each of these individual tactics were going to deliver on our financial metrics for the following year. So that was, that was quite the place to learn how to manage a business and on someone else's dime.
Yeah.
So
Did you
really
leave?
great.
Did you leave there and you came directly to Seattle?
I did.
And when you got to Seattle, did you immediately start your business?
I did. So when I left Quaker, it was originally with a different business in mind to start.
What was it?
Goodness. At the time, I thought I wanted to start a chain of high-end nail salons that served cocktails. It was like Sex in the City.
Oh, wow.
meets nail salons, which is an idea that now is alive and well here even in Seattle.
Is it?
It is. But it took me a while to figure out. I went down that path, and then I very quickly realized that wasn't the right path for me. I don't really want to touch people's feet ever.
Well, you could always open it and hire people.
That was the plan.
Right. Yeah. So you start the business and you're leading the tours and then it starts to grow and you have to start hiring people. Is that right?
That is right.
So how did you implement, I have a lot of questions. So, because I've always been impressed with your business ability, and now it makes more sense to me, like kind of your background, because I have no business background. I'm just scrappy, figuring it out day by day. I don't have a plan or a path. And you've always impressed me as somebody who is, you probably know your Excel spreadsheets and your numbers, forwards and backwards. And me, I'm just like, I don't know. There's money in the bank and I know it's a viable business and I'm just going to, move ahead with it and have fun in the process. But now it makes more sense because you had this both branding and the business background. What did you take from your time at Quaker Oats or Quaker and be able to implement into your business?
I think my passion, or what I felt was my strong suit coming out of Quaker, was how to build a brand. And that always starts with really getting into the shoes of your consumer. And for Savor Seattle, I was that target consumer. I am that person who loves to experience food when I travel. I understood the psychology behind this person because I just happened to be that person. So building or starting Savor from scratch, I think that was probably the most meaningful part of the process, was to create a brand around my target customer. So hence my brand colors being what they are today. So pink, I know that sounds kind of, maybe a little strange, but yes, I'm going to tap right into that. Why not? Right? I love pink. And I understood that the primary decision maker when it comes to tours tend to be the woman. right? So why not appeal to women? And at the time that our segment of culinary tourism was so new, there was nobody really to look towards except for 2 other food tour businesses in the US that were older than ours. And one of them had only started the year prior.
And where was that?
Chicago. And then the godfather of our industry, and he's in New York. But these were businesses run by men, and they really were targeting a male clientele, I think, unbeknownst to them, perhaps, but maybe that's just their lens. And I thought, gosh, no, like I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a brand that's geared towards my target demographic. So building that brand was really meaningful. And that was the biggest lesson I took away from my time at Quaker is consumer insights.
How much control or oversight do you have now of your own brand? Because how many employees do you have? Or how many employees / contractors, I should say, because I know you employ a lot of people, but they're not technically employees.
Everyone that works with Savor is an employee.
Oh, okay.
And the number of people depends on the season because it's really seasonal. We're in our big hiring push right now. So if any listeners are interested in being a tour guide for Savor, we are definitely hiring. So I think in peak season, we're about 32, 35 people. In our shoulder season, the colder months, we ratchet down to about 22, 25.
And then how many people are in the office?
So we have about 7 or 8 people in the office. It's a mix of full-time and part-time.
And then how much control then do you have? Because that's a small team. That's a small team in the office. How much control do you have over branding and ideas? Because you're bringing a lot of that with you and a lot of that passion and a lot of that vision. But it's also got to be demanding on your time. Like, do you have a lot of things on your plate? I'm sure. So how much are you kind of spending on that part of it? Or are you able to let that go and say, you know my vision, you take care of it?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I think it always starts with knowing who you are. And I read a book a few years ago. If I can think of the exact name, I'll give it to you so that it can be a resource for the podcast listeners.
I'll put it in the show notes.
It's about knowing what you bring to the table that is uniquely you, that you're better at than, say, 80 or 90% of the world in your own estimation. And I realized that why I was put on the salt of this earth is to be a spark for other people, to be that visionary, to drive with my passion and to bring people along with me. And that is something that I 100% do every day. So that's a part of my brand as an individual and certainly for Savor. And so I don't feel like there's ever a moment in time where I am challenged about maintaining this brand because the entire team feels the same way about the brand. But yes, I set the vision. I help illuminate the path, but I am not necessarily the one leading the team or the tribe as they walk down the path. And I can tell you that for the first 7.5, 8 years of running Savor, I was that person. And I realized I'm not the right person for that.
You were probably up until a point.
Yes.
So it wasn't like you had made a mistake for 7.5 years. It was just that it outgrew you. Probably.
Totally. Totally. And now we have our number 2, who is pretty much running everything at Savor. And in fact, runs my life too. His name is Terry. And I joke he should have his own hashtag, everyone needs a Terry because he's incredible.
Yeah.
And the team and Savor wouldn't be what it is today without him. 100%.
Awesome. How did you find him?
Oh my gosh. It took 5.5 months to find that unicorn. We had actually hired a consultant to come into the company, and really, ultimately, what ended up happening was a demolition of the internal guts of the org structure, writing standard operating procedures. I mean, that transformation from being this small, scrappy, fly by the seat of your pants kind of company to one that's scalable, solid, other people can come into and not feel totally lost, needed to happen. And when we did so, identified that we needed a number 2, a managing director. And so this consultant helped us write the job description, helped interview and vet, and we went through multiple rounds of interviews, but ultimately found him.
Isn't that scary, bringing on somebody else to be like a number two?
It was.
Like to me, that would be financially scary because it means that you've got to pay the right, you've got to pay the right person, but you've got to pay them appropriately so they don't go away and they stick around. And then you've got to grow the business in the process to make sure that you can pay that person.
Totally. And it was scary. And I think I wrestled with that decision for a really long time, but my hand was also forced by a health issue. And it was kind of colliding of many forces all at once that pointed to, you need to do this. But ultimately, even before the health issue, which we can chat about in a little bit, I came to the realization that it didn't matter that I would ultimately need to take a pay cut, either in the short term or potentially the long term, for me to get a semblance of a life back, because I just couldn't imagine continuing at the pace and the trade-offs that I had knowingly made and were willing to make in the first 6 years of my company. It just wasn't going to be sustainable. And I came to that decision and said, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'm willing to make far less money, potentially, hopefully not for the long term, to have somebody come into the company that's going to relieve that and give me a path to what the rest of my life should look like. Because at that time, I kept thinking to myself, is this what my life is going to look like next year, 3 years from 5 years from now, 10 years from now? If that's the case, I can't do it.
Because you were spending so much time on the business?
On the business, in the business. I didn't feel happy. And I realize now that I wasn't happy 100%. And that wasn't sustainable, because when you're growing a company, and I think every individual or entrepreneur is better suited at different points in their company's evolution. And I realized at the time that my skill set was best when the business was younger and needing like all hands on deck and wearing like 6 hats.
And the enthusiasm and the energy that it takes to be that early entrepreneur.
Totally. And so once we were past that point, you can't sustain like a really growing company on that alone. And at the time I didn't know how to do things any differently than what had gotten me to that point. And same for my team, right? Like, just do more the same terrible way.
Yeah.
That was fine when you're small and scrappy, but not sustainable once you're bigger.
Do you think you would have hit that point had you not had your health issue? Do you think it might have lingered for another year or two?
No, I had actually made the decision to hire that number 2 before the health issue. But when the health issue came up, I thought, gosh, thank goodness. It is a sign. It really was.
So let's talk about the health issue. What was the health issue?
So as a cavalier, busy entrepreneur and taking my age for granted, at the time I was, I think, 34, and I was working a lot of hours. I was, 80 hours a week probably. And 2 young kids.
And 2 kids. How old were they at the time? Oh, 2 girls, right?
1 boy, 1 girl.
Oh, 1 boy.
And I think at the time they were 2 and 4, something like that. So it was just the eye of the storm. I think maybe even younger than that, like 1 and 3. And I was very much burning the candle at both ends. I lost hearing in my left ear for ultimately 5 months, and I didn't do anything about it. It just went away one day, and I thought, well, gosh.
Your hearing or the issue went
hearing
away?
Yeah. I couldn't talk on the phone out of that ear, and I thought, gosh, well, as quickly as it went away, it'll come back just as fast, right?
Why didn't you go to the doctor on day 1?
I was too busy. I said, I don't have time to go and see a doctor who will ultimately, I'm sure, send me to another doctor, and I have to see another specialist, and I'm just too busy. I don't have time for that. And so I let it persist. I also got strep throat twice in 3 months during that stretch of time.
During that same time.
And that's ultimately the only reason why I ended up seeing a doctor was for the second time getting what I thought was strep throat. I needed drugs, I knew, to overcome that. So while I was sitting in the doctor's office, I said, well, by the way, I can't
Angela.
hear this ear.
Gosh.
Can you take a look at that? And so several specialists and appointments later, because crazy enough, I passed all of their hearing tests that they gave me. So they thought it wasn't legitimate. And so finally I saw an ENT who scoped me through my nose. And while that was probably the longest minute of my life, because all I heard while this tube was up my nose was, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. You don't want to hear words like that from a specialist. So net result was, he said, well, there's a mass in your head that is about this big with red bumps all over it, and it's putting pressure.
So about a nickel size or so?
Nickel size. Sorry.
Yeah.
Showing you.
I can see.
Over the airwaves.
Looks like a nickel, yeah.
And it's putting pressure on your eustachian tube. So what you're experiencing is equivalent to going up in an airplane to 30,000 feet and never popping your ears. That's why you feel like you can't hear, but you've passed all the hearing tests, because technically you can hear. You just feel like you can't. And so he sent me home with a whole bunch of drugs.
So what was your response to that?
And he's like, don't freak out. It could be a tumor.
Yeah.
But come back in 3 weeks and we'll scope you again. But in the meantime, did you know you have a chronic gnarly sinus infection that you've probably had for the last 6 months? I was like, what? He's like, how do you not know? I thought,
I've been too busy.
I just thought I felt crummy because my kids are germ factories and I'm just catching what they have over and over. I was the most run down, ragged, overweight, tired, stressed out human known to man. Like, it was just a terrible time.
So when you got that news, did you just think, oh shit, like, I'm going to die?
Yeah.
Like, that's where my mind would go.
Yeah, totally. And you know, they say that it takes one of the big 3 Ds to make lasting change: death, disease, divorce, right? Fear of death because of disease was what did it for me. Those next 3 weeks, I kind of made up my mind. I made up my mind that it didn't matter what the diagnosis was going to be 3 weeks later, that it was time for me to make a change. And that part of that was, yes, hiring a number 2 for my company and cleaning up my health, because that had taken such a backseat for all my life, pretty much, but certainly as an entrepreneur.
And an entrepreneur in the food industry.
Yes.
So you're surrounded by that. Oh, I have to try this, or I have to go to this restaurant, or I have to do this. I have to go to this event.
It's an occupational hazard every day.
Yeah.
I eat and drink for a living.
Yeah.
Quite literally. People say that that's enviable, and it's true. I do love my job, and I'd like to think I'm pretty good at my job.
I think you are.
But if I hadn't found fitness at that point in my life, I would have continued to be heavy. But in that moment, I gave up alcohol, and that was the easiest thing at the time for me to cut. I was like, I can do without wine. I don't need that. So I didn't drink for 6 months, and I found a personal trainer, started working out. I hated working out. All the way up until that point in my life, I'd never enjoyed exercise, ever. Had a gym membership I never used. And so once I started working out with her for about 6 weeks or so, and I saw some of those initial pounds come off pretty quickly, and learning moves that I'd never done before. Like, I didn't know what a burpee was. Are you kidding? I was like, excuse me, what is that?
They're awful.
They are, but I like them now. I felt comfortable enough to go and approach the gym right in my neighborhood that I'd always driven by. I didn't know what they did. I had no idea. So I walked in one day and I said, can I try a class here? And they said, do you know what we do? I'm like, nope, no idea. And it turns out that they do high intensity interval training classes, which is a mix of cardio and strength training. And you walk out looking like you just walked through a rainstorm.
Very much like a CrossFit, or what CrossFit is. And that's why you see people running down the street or running around a block with weights in their hands because they're doing CrossFit. Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love. I was hooked. It was the first time in my whole life that I enjoyed working out. And I set a goal for myself that whenever I hit that magical number, even though it's not about a number. At the time, I thought it needs to be a number, so I have an actual goal. I said, gosh, when I lose 20 pounds, I'm going to let myself go on an epic trip, and I'm going to chop off all my hair. And so I did a year and a half later. But it really wasn't about the numbers that came off. It really turned out to be like this mental fitness and evolution, and what happened internally with my energy too, and
so
it radiates out.
Let's hear the story though about the mass. So what happened with that? So you went on the drugs.
I went on the drugs.
Back a few weeks later.
Yeah, and at the time I was with my ex, and I brought him with me to the appointment because I was really ready. We were ready for bad news, right? And they scoped me again, and the doctor was really surprised. He said, "Whoa, the mass got smaller. That's interesting." And so as it turns out, they tracked it months later, and I kept coming back, and the mass got smaller and smaller and smaller. And ultimately...
Was your hearing coming back?
Yes. He thinks now that it was a result of my chronic sinus infection, and very likely that one mass that I felt an adverse, symptom for, I likely had them all over the inside of my head, but that was the only one that presented a symptom that I noticed. But yeah, I'm so grateful. It was a warning shot across the bow.
So during the time when those mass or potentially masses were getting smaller, were you feeling better? Was your mind clearer? Did you have more energy? Was everything just improving at that point?
Everything was changing. Yes, my mind was clearer. I felt more alive than I'd been ever because of exercising. Believe it or not, I started sleeping less or needing to sleep, a lot less. Yet I felt more energized than I'd ever been. So now
exercise will do that.
Yeah. Now I mean, honestly, a good night's sleep is 7 hours, but I don't often get that. Maybe I should.
Do you mean a good night's sleep, meaning number of hours, or that you've had a good night, good uninterrupted night?
Both.
Okay.
Both for sure. It is pretty rare that I can get 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Pretty rare.
What's waking you up?
Kids.
Okay.
They just don't sleep well, and then I end up staying up late to work and so forth. It's the life of an entrepreneur, which I wouldn't trade for the world.
I don't sleep a lot of hours, like a lot of long hours. And it's usually not interrupted sleep, but it's 6.5, 7 hours is enough for me.
That's great.
Yeah. And if I'm beyond that, if I wake up groggy in the morning or I feel like I need more sleep, it's unusual.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
So health issue resolved and exercising, running when you're not sidetracked or sidelined with your running. And what's happening for you now? Because I know you've got a whole nother bag of issues, or I shouldn't say issues, but you've got a whole nother path that you're taking.
For sure.
Right now. And, before we get into that, let's talk about solo travel.
Yeah.
Because that might be a good introduction into what is going on more for you today.
Yeah.
And kind of be a big inspiration for people. So you had mentioned just before we started recording that you said, I really enjoy solo travel, and you've done it in your life, and you're getting into it even more so, which is just fantastic. How did you come upon solo travel and travel in general?
Travel for me touches a part of my soul that I just can't even put into words. I think it has to do with being an explorer and a lifetime learner. And there's nothing that challenges you more and makes you feel more uncomfortable than going to a foreign place where ideally you don't speak the language and you don't know anyone there. That's like the extreme case, but I think dialing it back to make it more accessible, I think just anywhere, going to Portland by yourself.
Or Mount Rainier.
I did both of those things by myself. And I thought, gosh, why is this so taboo, right? I remember going on my first international trip by myself to Italy. And it was actually to meet up with one of our tour groups that was already in process and there. And I was sitting at my departure gate, and in the terminal, they started making announcements about departures, and they repeat it in multiple languages. And when I started hearing the second language, it was in French, I believe, I felt like this, as if like an empty tank of gasoline was getting refilled. And I just thought, oh my goodness, what have I been missing? And that is what I need.
Had you traveled solo previous to you being an entrepreneur? So this was a completely new thing for you.
Totally.
A completely new experience.
Totally.
Wow. And how old were you then?
It was just within the last few years.
Wow.
So that was, I think, maybe 2.5 years ago. It was right after I kicked off that transformative health journey.
And how old are you now? 30?
I'm 37.
Okay. Yeah, great.
And it changed my life because I always knew travel was important to me, but experiencing travel as an individual forced me out of my comfort zone in so many ways. I'm an introvert. Nobody believes me when I tell them that.
I don't believe you.
Extroverted introvert. But there's nothing that challenges you more or challenged me more than going out to eat by myself, sitting at the bar by myself. And I thought, gosh, you know what? It always starts with a question, right? And food to broker a conversation. And so I would turn to the person next to me, total stranger, and be like, what are you eating there? Or what do you recommend here? And that's all it takes, always. And it just changed my perspective on the world. And my energy that I was putting out into the world also changed. And the opportunities now that have come have changed too.
Suddenly everything opens up to you when you're not afraid to do something by yourself, because you don't have to have someone else's permission, and you don't have to wait for somebody else to be ready in order to do it. You can just do it. And it doesn't have to be just travel, but like you said, it could be just eating out. And I know a lot of people, men and women, who are afraid to just go to a movie or go eat a meal by themselves because they feel like they're a loser. And if you can get over that hump, and then everything is open to you. You're not afraid to be by yourself. You're not afraid of what goes on in your mind while you're on your own.
I still remember going to Portland on my own just last year, and I met a gal who quite literally just was befuddled. She said, wait a second, wait, let me get this straight. You were here by yourself? I said, yes.
Where was she?
She's from Portland too.
No, but I mean, was she at an Airbnb, or was she...
We were at a restaurant.
Oh, okay. You were just chatting with her at the restaurant.
She just came up to me with her group of friends. I was at the bar by myself eating. And she came over and started a conversation, and she said, wait, where are you from? You don't seem like you're from here. I said, I'm not that far from you. I'm from Seattle. She said, but who are you here with? And she looked around, and I said, I'm here by myself.
Wow.
She's like,
she couldn't get it.
Yeah. She's like, why would you do that? And I said, well, why not?
Yeah.
Right? And it was just a fascinating conversation to have with someone, because people are just not used to this idea or comfortable with it.
I think they're getting more used to it. It surprises me in Portland, because Portland is, I think it's more progressive than Seattle.
Totally.
But, so it's happening more and more. And I can imagine you go to Iowa, or you go to Hopkins.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Yes.
Minnesota. Is that right? Hopkins in Minnesota. You go there, and no one would believe it. But at least Portland, you would think. But yeah, that's great. So you've discovered this whole new path for you. What's in store for you in terms of solo travel trips?
So I've got a lot in the pipeline for the coming year. I'm heading, actually, it's not a solo trip, but I'm super excited about my next major trip. I'm going to Peru.
When are you going?
At the end of June.
Oh, wow. Coming up. Oh, my gosh.
Less than 80 days.
Yeah,
away.
wow. Not that you're counting or anything.
Nope, not at all. And it's a small group with the same person. Actually, she's a local female entrepreneur as well. Annie Chang from The Table Less Traveled. She's actually the company that we partner with for operating our Italy
trip. I saw that.
So if this trip goes well to Peru, it'll very likely be a product that we will work to help her fill spaces in and operate as well. So I'm going with a girlfriend. Her name's Bree. It's fascinating. She also does a lot of solo travel as well. And when I posted on Facebook a link to this trip and said, who's coming with me? I was really surprised that she piped in and said, I'll go. And I thought, really? And so we got together for drinks the next night and we really did hatch a plan. We're going to go together.
Good. Are you going to do Machu Picchu?
We are.
Good. John and I were there in December, and then I'm bringing a group in October to Machu Picchu. Yeah. So
How awesome.
I know. Yeah. You'll love it. And it's a food, like it's difficult for me because of my self-imposed food restrictions. But I know Peru is a big foodie place now. It's huge. So you'll find plenty down there. No doubt. You'll have a tour.
And I've got a couple of other fun trips coming up. So I'm running, hopefully, knock on wood, if my injury holds up, it doesn't get worse, rather, I'm going to be doing the Vancouver Lululemon Seawees Half Marathon in September. And then I've got a couple of other trips planned that I think, will be really transformative. And every time I go anywhere, locally or internationally.
So how are you managing all this with your business in particular? I know you have your second in command right now, but how are you managing it with family life and with business and just the pressures of owning a business? Because you are the owner.
Yeah, that's a great question. The last few weeks have been, I'll be honest, really a struggle. And that was primarily driven by figuring out, as a single mom, how am I going to continue to drive my business to where it needs to go, and yet still be a good mom and still be true to who I am as an individual and what I need to be happy. Because if nothing I've learned is that in the last 2.5 years is that if I'm not happy and whole, no one else around me is going to be happy and whole.
So 2.5 years, that was the health issue.
Correct.
Okay. So you figured it out. You had this big transition turning point then, and you thought, okay, I've got to figure out how to make myself healthy, which will get me happier.
Mm-hmm. And now I am. I really do believe that I never was 100% before, and I just didn't know it until until I reached that.
Well, there's nobody who's perfect, right? There's nobody who, I don't know, the Dalai Lama probably comes pretty close, I mean, he's not a perfect person, but I think he's pretty tuned in, I would imagine. So I don't think there's any of us that don't have low-grade anxiety, stress, health issues, making the wrong decisions. That we all have that. And when you start peeling back the layers and you start realizing whether it's, I can't tell you the number of people that I know who do a fast, right? Or a cleanse. And for that week or for that 30 days, whatever it is, they're like, I feel great. And then they start getting back into their old habits again and they forget how great they felt at that point. Or you don't realize that you can continue the process and feel good every day. Mm-hmm. And not that I'm there. I think I'm getting closer. Every day I'm getting closer and I'm more tuned into that. But it sounds like you had that experience and then you held on to that and you remembered that you needed to continue feeling, you started to feel good. You needed to continue on that process.
And it took a chunk of time where I didn't feel good for me to feel motivated to get it back. And I can tell you that. You
mean you didn't feel good after the health scare?
Yeah. Or the last 3 months have been really challenging for me because
you're not running.
I wasn't running, which coincided with a really challenging time for me personally and professionally, and wrestling with, gosh, I know where my company needs to go in the next 2 years. And then,
so let's stop there. Where does your company need to go in the next 2 years?
Like top secret information.
Oh, okay.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know if it was like we're going to expand, we're going to double our market share in the next 2 years. I didn't know if it was that clear or something like you said. You're working on something in the background, maybe that's not quite out there.
Let's just say that there are some hopefully game-changing things that we will bring to market in the next year to 2 years. And I had a very difficult but not surprising conversation with Terry, our number 2, after a really empowering 2 days of business meetings. And it was a set of meetings I didn't want to be in initially and had tried to bargain out of, and said to him, I said, you need to do these yourself. And he's like, no, I really need you here, which is pretty rare for him to say. And after those 2 meetings, I said to him, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't think I've felt that alive and connected with what I should be doing in this role and at this company. I haven't felt that verve in a while, in a long time. And he said to me, he said, you know what? These launches that we're working on, they're going to be good with or without you. But with you, it's going to be great. And he said, we want you at the table because this is what you bring to the table. And so I took that all in, and I knew that there were implications for that. And being a single mom, I'm always torn, and it's hard. I feel like as a woman, we often feel very judged internally and from people looking in from the outside when it comes down to making difficult decisions like that. 99% of the world looks at me and says, how could she possibly be thinking about trading off time with her young children to be building her career? Whereas I feel like if I was a man and I was the breadwinner, nobody would ever think twice to question like, oh gosh, he has to work late or he needs to go do a business trip. I mean,
right,
that's
it's just normal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's normal. And so wrestling with that and coming to terms with that over the last 6 weeks, and yes, very much feeling that judgment from external forces and the guilt that I feel every day when I go and show up at my kids' school. And I know those mothers and teachers are looking at me and saying, gosh, we only see her 2 out of the 5 days a week, right? Well, that's the price that I ultimately have to pay and I have to own.
Do you really think that they say that? Or do you think...
I've heard it.
I was going to say maybe, okay, you've heard it, so that's fair enough. But I'm thinking maybe they're saying, because I'm assuming the 3 days of the week, your ex is picking them up.
Yes.
Maybe they're saying, what a cool dad, he's picking them up 3 days a week.
Oh, for sure.
But there's still the judgment, you think, on that part. I
mean, nobody misses why, 98% of, pickups are actually done by women and by the women of the households, right? Nobody's thinking like, oh gosh, where are the dads? Nobody thinks that, right?
Because dad's at work.
Dad's at work because he has to be. He should be. And so I think you know what? It took me a lot of this pain and guilt and for me to realize, I was like, you know what? That is the opinion potentially of 99% of the world, but I'm not living a 99% life. I am living in that 1% where I get to do some really cool, amazing shit every day. And in order for me to do that, sometimes I have to make really unpopular decisions. I'm reminded by Tom Douglas. I remember this quote he shared with me a long time ago. He said, some of the most interesting people are not universally liked. And I think, well, I am a people pleaser, but there's just no way I can make everyone happy. And it's hard enough making myself a happy whole individual. But I know that for the next 2 years' time, I need to give myself and my company the runway that it needs. And there is a trade-off. You can't have everything. Life is a book full of chapters. You can't read all the chapters at the same time. You can't have everything. I do believe that. You just can't have it all at once, and you're living different parts in different sequences maybe, or there's shorter chapters and longer chapters, but it is part of my story.
You're drinking tea here. Did you happen to notice what your teacup says?
I didn't get out of bed to be ordinary. That's so true. So true.
Yeah. So that's perfect tie-in with the conversation. So 6 weeks ago, you've brought that up. So is that when you had this meeting? You had the business meeting was 6 weeks ago?
The business meeting was actually 4 weeks ago. And then I had already been wrestling with what my ex and I had agreed to for a residential schedule or parenting plan. And we already weren't at 50%, like 50-50. And so...
Meaning he had a little bit more? Okay.
A little bit more. And getting to that, less, like for me to even own less than 50-50 from months and months ago of coming to terms was already difficult for me to relinquish that I'm not going to be a 50-50 parent.
Because you're the mom,
yes.
And you're supposed to have at least 50-50?
Yes.
Because society told you that.
And that I should feel, just felt unnatural not to be. And I felt, but yet at the same time, I felt very uncomfortable with that choice. And I constantly felt that strain on my time. And I wasn't as present or focused during that time when I did have them.
I was going to say probably if you're 60-40, 70-30, and you've got that smaller percentage, you're probably 120% when you're with them.
Totally.
And then it just makes up for the whole thing, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like I know that relationships with parents change over a child or an adult's lifetime. I think about my own childhood and conversations I've had with friends. People very rarely prefer both parents equally during their entire childhood and adult life.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That does change and ebbs and flows. And so as much as I know that right now, for sure, I am not as maternal as my ex is paternal. I know that. I feel very grateful. And they are super lucky to have him as their father, because this is what enables, honestly, me to continue to do what I feel called to do in my job, and certainly the energy that I put out as being a spark for everyone that I come in contact with, not just as a leader for Savor, but for how I show up in relationships with friends and everyone that I meet.
You use the word maternal. Do you believe that? And not like your answer is not going to make you a bad mom or a bad person, but do you believe that it has something to do with you feeling maternal or not maternal, or not as maternal as he is paternal? Or do you think that it's the definition that we have been told means maternal, that you give up everything to be with your kids?
I think it's probably a little bit of all of those things. And certainly if parenting were a competition, which I know it's not, he is definitely far more paternal than I am maternal. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a surprise to everyone. Nobody would have predicted that before we had kids. I would say that I would not ever look at myself and think that my primary identity is a mother. If anything, if I had to pick one part of myself as my primary identity, which I think is impossible for anyone to do, and they shouldn't do that, I would probably say that I'm more of an entrepreneur than I am a mother. But I don't think that you should have to choose and be just one thing.
Right. And I don't think, and wasn't my intention in asking that question
and I know it's
to
not.
put you in a box, but because I don't think that you should be, like, that's what I'm trying to roll back, is that I don't think that you should say just because I want a business means I'm less maternal, because I don't think that has to be the case.
I'll be honest. I think that it also comes down to where you feel like you show up best. And if I'm being really honest and candid with myself, I think I show up my best self when I'm in an environment where there are measurable metrics of success, right? So like, be it at school where there's grades, or in a business environment where there's numbers to hit.
Yeah.
You look at these like blobs of humans and they can't tell you if you did a good job that day.
You won't know
right?
for another 18 years, probably.
Right.
You're like, yeah, success. Look.
Success, look. You didn't do drugs. Okay.
Yeah, right.
I kept you off the pole. We're good.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a natural part of who I am that I struggle with every day. And certainly as they've gotten older, it's been better in many ways because they can verbalize when you have done a shit job that day. They're like, man, you need to take a break, mama. So I'm like, okay, I heard you loud and clear. Versus when, they're in diapers and just screaming all day, you just feel like a failure all the time. But I do think that, where I feel my strength from the most is typically from places where there is measurable success. So be it in fitness, right? In running, knowing I added that extra mile, or I shaved off an extra 5 seconds off my pace, or I'm at the gym and I'm watching my heart rate being blasted on a public screen for everyone to see, right? For that accountability. That's how my brain is wired. So it's really hard to take that and try to, equate that to parenthood, which is pretty nebulous. And so my comfort zone definitely is in a measurable space.
Do you have mom friends that you can talk to about this?
I have a handful of mom entrepreneur friends that get this. I have lots of mom friends that don't get this.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm thinking. It's got to be so kind of lonely, but you're good at solo, right?
Yeah,
we know you're good at solo,
yeah.
But it's got to be really lonely knowing, and like you said, you've heard the comments and you don't have a chance to kind of explain yourself.
And even if you do have a chance to explain yourself, which sometimes I feel compelled to do, I just realized that you can't, the only thing that you can control is you, right? And how you process a situation. You can't change how anyone else reacts or behaves, or really their fundamental core beliefs. And so I spent, I think, far too much time feeling that judgment from women, men, anyone who I was bold enough to have this conversation with and share that vulnerability with. And I really don't expect people to get it. And like I said, I think that I am living that 1%. And that means that I'm not going to be very popular to most people. And that very much correlates to even new people that I meet, right? And we start these dialogues and they're like, gosh, you're pretty intense. And I was like, well, I am. And so it's either you're going to get Angela Light version or you're going to get the real. And I know that for 99% of the time, Angela Light will do really great. But if you get to see Angela Real, then that's the person I want to spend more time with. Because I spend enough of my time being Angela Light.
Where do you think it comes from, people who have that judgment? And are and what circumstances do people verbalize that to you? Or is it more sideways glances, or is it literally, you can't do that, you're a mom?
I think it's a combination of things, right? Sometimes it's verbalized straight up, right? And I don't necessarily know that that they even realize that there's so much judgment being communicated when they're like, gosh, where have you been? And I think, well, working, right? Where else do you think I've been, right? I think it's just in general, being a female that's comfortable, confident, doesn't quote unquote need to be taken care of. That doesn't necessarily mean I don't want to be taken care of, but in a different capacity. And I think people mistake that confidence for something else entirely. And I've come across that a few times in business, where I think because of my gender and my age, and frankly ethnicity and the combination of those things, is that if I do speak my mind, which I do in a business environment, and I feel comfortable doing that regularly, sometimes it's perceived as being, I don't know, like I'm just too type A or something like that, right? Whereas I think and I've heard it as much, that if I were a man, it would just be me going after what I want and I should be doing it, right? But as a woman, it's like, gosh, she's something else. I think, gosh, okay, well, if something else means that I'm going to build my company and take it to the next level and be an industry leader and help blaze a path where people haven't gone before, then fuck it, I'm going to do it.
Well, do you think that part of it too is, like you said, your ethnicity, is that there are certain expectations as are you fully Chinese?
I am.
Okay, so as a Chinese first generation, I don't know if, is it called first or second generation? Okay, whatever. Yeah, okay. Do you think that there's an expectation there too of like, oh, like the woman in Portland said, "Where are you from?" She might have expected you to speak Chinese for all you know, right? Yeah.
I do think that I've kind of raged against that machine my whole life, right? This perception that being a female Asian person that I should be more meek and demure or so forth, or maybe that's the expectation. And so when I'm not that, maybe the reaction is maybe even more adverse than what is expected, because culturally maybe that is the perception of what I should have been. And so when I'm not that, people are like, oh my gosh, like that's just so strange, you know? And I do get that reaction sometimes. They're like, gosh, you're really refreshing.
Oh, refreshing. See, that's good though.
Yeah, so that's good. I'll take that as a positive.
I know. That's really good.
But no, I mean, just in general, there are very few moments I feel like in my life that I'm reminded of what I look like. It's pretty rare. And when I am reminded that, generally it's in a good capacity, like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I'm Asian, because hopefully I'll wake up looking this young forever, you know?
Yeah.
So, no, it's pretty rare. I feel like it's not often.
We're a little bit more open and integrated and diverse, I think, here in Seattle than in a lot of other places too. Like if you were still back in Minnesota, it might be a little bit different, but
for sure.
At least here it's a little bit more open. Do you think, do you live over on the east side?
I do. I live in Kirkland.
Okay. Do you think that there is a different reception to you just on the east side than there is in the Seattle area?
Not at all. I think that Seattle is so diverse, especially when it comes to the Asian population, that, I don't think there's really a difference.
I just didn't know if the east side, no, but I thought maybe the east side was a little bit more conservative or a little bit more questioning than over here. But maybe that's my perception of Bellevue.
I do feel like I need to put my makeup on to walk the dog.
Okay,
sometimes.
see, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So I was going to say, maybe I just totally stuck my foot in my mouth for anybody who's on the east side, but that's just my perception.
But you know how much I care about that.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what's next for you in terms of travel? Anything that you could talk about? Business-wise, I know you've got a couple of spots that are open on your Italy trips this year. What can you talk about in terms of growth and changes that you're going through?
Yeah, so I hope to continue on my fitness journey. I think that I've figured out, and like I said, new to fitness, right, within the last 2.5 years.
Isn't it amazing?
Life-changing.
Yeah. See, you're much younger than I am, though. So you've got that. I mean, I just kind of found fitness, I would say, maybe at 45, and you've got 10 plus years on me in terms of that. So that's great.
I'm just glad I found it.
Yeah.
Period.
I know. Everybody should go find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Doesn't matter the age.
Totally. So I hope to continue to foster that and more travel, solo and otherwise, to places that I've never been to before.
How do you continue to inspire? Because that's part of what you want to do, is you want to bring your enthusiasm, your brand of enthusiasm to people. How do you do that when you've got, quote unquote, only a team of maybe 7 people in the office that you're interacting with every day? Like, how do you, and by you, I mean me, like, how do we get that message out to more people?
Well, I spend a lot of my quote unquote free time doing what I feel like I should be doing, not just at Savor, but promoting this brand that I represent, which is by doing things like this podcast, being able to share my story. I do speaking engagements. I'm on panels frequently, media related and PR related activities whenever I can. I joke that while I'm still young and somewhat fun to look at, I should probably maximize that because that's not going to last forever. And then
yes, but Asian, it will last until you're 80 at least.
And then that's the morning that I wake up with, with like a bowl cut, and everyone will start speaking slower and louder to me, and I'm gonna have to move to an Asian country at that point.
No, you'll say it's my brain tumor. That's right. I can't hear you because it's my brain tumor.
Oh my goodness. So I feel very fortunate that I get to share this message in a lot of different ways. And my team and I am very blessed that a small but mighty team that is leading the charge. And so even though I'm not physically in the office every day, we all know what we're working towards. And there are some really fun and incredible things that are in the pipeline I wish I could talk about.
When can you?
In the next probably 4 weeks.
Okay.
And so after that, it'll be out into the world.
Well, we'll have you come back. Maybe not in 4 weeks, but we'll have you come back at some point and tell us how it's going.
Good.
From there. So more travel, business stuff, clicking in, health stuff. You're back to running small amounts at this point, but you're still doing your high intensity workouts. Great.
I need to get my health on track so that I can be the best me. In the last few months, being benched from running for 3 months really did a number mentally and obviously on my body too. Like, it's hard to have that conversation with people because people look at me and say, oh gosh, you look so fit and thin.
Yeah, you totally do.
But I know how I feel in my skin. And so the toll that it's taken on me, knowing where I was and how great I felt then, not just mentally, but physically, and that whole combination, I can't wait to bring that back.
Well, it's been a bit of an arc. And I said before we were recording that when I first met you a number of years ago, it was when you had those 20 pounds that you talked about having lost. So then you went down, you lost it, and now it's crept back up a little bit, just a little bit, not 20 pounds, nowhere near that, we should say, but it's crept back up. So you know the difference between, and you probably have a concern of like, I don't want to go back to that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. And I know I will never be back to where I was before. But even just, my skinny jeans are real skinny right now, and that's just not how I want to roll. But at the end of the day, it's just about how you feel in your body and what your mind feels. And I know that I'm on that path to get that back. And every day that I'm outside running, every single one of those steps, I feel more and more alive. Like that gas tank is being filled again in a different way than travel is. So I'm getting that back and I'm super excited.
Well, when you're back to running, I don't know how far Kirkland is from here, but on my long run, maybe I'll come run to Kirkland and we'll go for a run and then I'll run back to Seattle.
Oh my gosh, you're incredible. I don't know how you do it. It's amazing.
You'll get there. I mean, you're doing a half, right? You've got a half coming up. And now like I said, I'm so grateful for it. I ran 18 yesterday.
18 miles?
In 19-mile headwinds coming straight at me down on Alki. It was difficult. But you know what? I want to do this thing. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast yet. Have I? I don't know. I want to do this thing. It's called the Four Deserts. And it's the Gobi, Sahara. So the Gobi, the Sahara, Atacama in South America, and Antarctica. You do it in 1 year. I want to do it in 1 year. And it's 200 kilometers over 6 days. Each chunk is over 200 kilometers. So you go do the Sahara and you go for 6 days and you run 120 miles or whatever it is. And then a few months later, you go do the next one.
Amazing.
So I want to do that. So as I'm running in these 19-mile-an-hour headwinds, I'm thinking, you know what? This is better than running at 110 degrees across the Sahara. So I can, if I
it's all relative.
It is all relative. So if I can hang in there and do this, then I can do that other thing. So that's what was on my mind. But so the exercise stuff. And then, I was going to ask you about how do you manage your food and staying healthy when you work in the food industry? Do you have to consciously make really wise decisions about what you're eating? Or do you not eat at all? Or how do you manage that?
So as you got a sneak preview into when I walked in through your door, I come in with snacks all the time. So I had hummus and carrots, and I've got an apple in there, and I roll with water all the time. When I am not out at a restaurant or out socially, I'm really, really dialed in with my food. So I'm really high protein. So I eat so many eggs. Like I have hard-boiled eggs in my fridge all the time. A rotisserie chicken all the time because it's already pre-cooked, and it's protein, canned protein. So I do a lot of sardines, canned wild salmon.
Not spam.
Not spam, although that's delicious too. There's a time and a place.
Hawaii.
Yes.
Hawaii is the time and place for spam.
Good.
It's the only
masubi.
Yeah.
Yum. So if you look in my fridge, people would generally be surprised by what they see because it's a lot of proteins and tons of vegetables. So when I'm not out eating, which is often actually I'm out a lot. So any chance that I can when I'm at home, I try to be really, really disciplined because otherwise.
Do you follow paleo? Yeah. That sounds very paleo to me.
I mean, I think paleo light. I cheat all the time. So just in general, I try to do low carb and high protein, and it works for me.
And your energy level feels good with the protein, with all that protein and everything.
For sure. And I do admit I am powered by coffee. So I drink probably on average between 4 and 6 cups a day.
Wow.
So, and I wake up at 4:40 in the morning. So I kind of need that French press ready to go. I set it out the night before. I do the scoops of coffee. It's all ready. It's under the hot water dispenser. So when I wake up, all I have to do is hit dispense.
What are you doing at 4:40 in the morning?
So my workouts at the gym for HIIT classes are at 5:30. So I have to get up at 4:40.
So despite not being able to run, you're still doing the HIIT classes.
I probably shouldn't have been either.
Well, yeah, but then can you imagine how bonkers you would have been?
Totally.
With no exercise.
Yeah, I was at fat camp for 3 weeks where I did 0.
What's fat camp?
Where I just ate ice cream and drank wine and ate whatever I wanted and did no exercise for 3 weeks.
Wait, fat camp, I thought you went to lose weight.
No.
Why were you at fat camp?
Because my physical therapist said, okay, look, you've stopped running, but you still have pain. Now we're going to make you stop doing spin because you still have pain. And now we're also going to say you can't lift because you still have pain. So let's try you doing nothing for 3 weeks.
So when you say fat camp, you just mean you didn't go somewhere.
Oh, no. I just checked myself into mental fat camp and I said, well, I'm just going to eat whatever I want.
Mental fat camp. Listeners, don't go to Angela. Yeah, don't go to Angela's mental fat camp. Okay.
They kicked me out of camp real quick though.
Okay.
Get out of here.
Well,
you need to go.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't handle that. That's bad.
No.
That's really bad.
It was bad.
Okay.
So I'm back.
So 4:40 you get up, you do your 5:30 class, you come home, you shower, you get ready, and then you go to work in an office, or are you working from home?
Most of the time these days, I do work remotely. So either at home or in a coffee shop, east side, west side, wherever I feel.
Is the office downtown?
Mm-hmm. It's right behind Pike Place Market.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So I'm very rarely in the office these days.
Well, it's a pain in the butt to get across the bridge and everything to have to commute. So that makes sense. You lose so much time in commuting.
Totally.
Makes more sense.
And I don't get work done when I'm in the office. I've been downgraded to a cabinet at the office.
Oh.
I went from an office to like the public 4-pack in a cubicle.
Yeah.
And then they said, we need the cubicle and you're never here anyway. So they moved all my stuff into a cabinet. It's really cute, actually.
I guess it is. But anyone visiting the office says, what's that? Oh, that's our
CEO's cabinet.
Yeah, the CEO's cabinet. That's her workspace on top of that with her coffee cup on top of there. And then do you do yoga? Do you do mental relaxation, meditation, or anything like that?
I don't, and I feel like I should. Running for me is that. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually thinking about augmenting my workouts to swim, because I think in the pool I might have that same kind of mental clarity and calm that comes from running, but a little less stressful for my non-spring chicken joints.
Yeah.
So I'll give that a whirl. But
your non-spring chicken joints that are 15 years younger than me.
Right. I know, but they're like hurting, right? So
yeah,
clearly,
but you'll get past that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
but
will.
no, I should. I've heard that from a lot of people to do meditation. So maybe that'll be part of my 2018. Do you meditate?
Yeah, every day. I'm on I have to check my app, but I'm on like a 105-day streak right now.
Good job.
Yeah, I use Insight Timer, it's called, and it's great. It's free, and it's and you can do guided meditations, or you can just do it where you set a bell at the beginning and at the end, or in between, like every 5 minutes. So I have mine set at 20 minutes, and then it goes off every 5 minutes, so I can kind of keep track.
Okay.
And it's a lifesaver is probably putting it too strongly, but it is amazing for me. And I've been doing it a long time too. Not that I've been doing it for a long time because I knew out of the gate that it was helpful for me. And so it's been a huge motivator for me. And so I know when I fall off the wagon, I can really tell. So you start, it's just like exercise. It's just like food. It's anything. When you start to dial in, and you start to realize, like I said, you start peeling stuff back, and then you just realize, oh, when I go back to that bad habit, then you don't feel good. You don't want to feel that because you know what feels good. So you just keep moving forward and keep trying to find the next thing that's going to make you feel even better.
That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to finally be pushed over the edge to do it.
Yeah. You don't have commute time. You're not on a bus or anything because that's the perfect time. Yeah, that's a good time. I mean, because you're already getting up at 4:40 in the morning. Like I can't imagine getting up any earlier. But you know what I do now? Because I do travel a lot. I use the time from pushing back on the tarmac to when we hit 10,000 feet and the little bell goes off. I use that,
great.
and it's generally 15 to 20 minutes or so. And I use that, and I just count that as my meditation. So
that's awesome.
Twice, when I'm traveling on a plane on the same day, I can get 2 meditations in, which is really neat. So that's,
That's awesome. Or maybe I could do it in the shower,
You could do it then too. Meditate anywhere.
Anytime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
You're going to have to check back with me the next time I'm on the show and see how I've been doing.
Back. I know.
I will. The meditation front.
I know. Yeah.
Keep me accountable.
And it doesn't have to be every day. That's the thing too. It doesn't have to be every day, but just kind of starting to get into that rhythm. And when you realize that there is a benefit to it, then you just want to do it. You want to keep doing it. Just like running, just like exercise, just like eating well. It's all of it.
Totally. Thank you.
I know. Anything else that we didn't cover that you want to chat about?
I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. I love what you said. Just to go back to this, just what you talked about, and it was a Tom Douglas quote too, is that when you're doing something different, extraordinary, interesting, out of the norm, you're not going to be popular, for one thing. Not everybody's going to love you. And but who wants to be ordinary, right? Didn't get out of bed to be ordinary. Yeah,
for sure.
But that is such a great lesson for people to hear.
Yeah,
because you are living an unconventional. I think you're living a less unconventional life than you think you are.
Totally,
slightly unconventional.
Yes,
but there's more of you. There's more of us out there being entrepreneurs.
Totally, and that's our tribe.
Absolutely, you should be on How I Built This. Do you know that podcast? Do you listen to podcasts?
I do listen to a handful of podcasts. I've heard of that one.
Yeah, How I Built This is wonderful. And you remind me like you would just be a great guest on it. But it's about how an entrepreneur started a business and kind of moved through that process.
So, I'd love to.
I know. Well,
maybe you know somebody.
I don't, but I wish
maybe
I did.
You should be on that podcast.
No. Anyway, okay. So a couple things that I wrap up with at the end of these conversations is, so this is the Be Bold podcast. What does it mean to you to be bold? And I know that you often use that as your hashtag too. So what does it mean to you?
It means to be uncomfortable and do it anyway. So the 2 hashtags that I live my life by are be bold and intention and intensity. I really think that's how I show up in the world, and I want to challenge myself every day to be a little bit uncomfortable. And from that, I'm going to grow. And I hope that every step forward that I take, that I help inspire somebody else to do the same. And that's what gives me incredible joy, is when I find out or hear through the grapevine that something that I shared maybe like 6 years ago at a panel inspired someone to finally take the step forward to start their business or to leave their job or whatever it was, to start their fitness journey. That is what drives me.
Isn't that a great feeling to get an email or just to hear feedback from someone and you're like, what? I just got an email from someone who said 11 years ago, we had this conversation. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh my
amazing.
God. It is great. Yeah, it feels great. So good. And I know you're reaching a lot of people with what you do. And then it kind of perpetuates. So you and your staff, you are influencing your staff. And I will tell you, I know for a fact that your staff, who's led me through the Pike Place Market tours, those people have then sprinkled their little bit of pink sunshine on me, with their pink umbrellas going through there. And it is really great. So thanks for doing what you do.
And thank you for your support over the years too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just been fun for me to see the whole thing grow. So the other thing is, where can people find you? Social media, websites, that kind of thing.
Sure. So on Instagram and Facebook, you can find us at Savor Seattle. That's spelled SAVOR, Seattle. And then on our website, which is savorseattletours.com.
Awesome. And then are you on social media yourself? And
I am.
Maybe people can friend you, or
sure.
Do you tweet? On Twitter?
I don't tweet personally, but you can find me on Instagram under my personal handle.
Great.
The handle is DUBLECHOCS. So double chocolates, basically, minus the U's. O. So DUBLECHOCS. And that's where I post all of my adventures.
Yum. Okay, great. And I'll make sure that I link to all of that in the show notes as well, so people can get to that. Angela, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. You're doing amazing things, and I can't wait to talk to you in 4 weeks and a day to find out what else is going on. But we'll have you back on the podcast to talk about that.
Thank you,
Beth. As well. Yeah, best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Boy, she really gets honest, doesn't she? I love the fact that she is following her own path and making her own rules. And that doesn't mean just leaving her family behind. She's definitely not doing that. But she does have the strength to make some unpopular decisions in order to get to a place where she knows that she can be happy. As I mentioned in the intro, I've always admired her for the really smart approach that she takes in terms of her business, but now I have so much more appreciation for what it is that she does, because I understand she is really pushing boundaries on so many levels. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it, and the podcast in general, with anyone whom you think might enjoy it. I do rely on word of mouth to help grow our audience. With more listeners, that will help me attract more guests. And speaking of guests, when you go to the BeBoldPodcast.com website, you'll see a guest submission form on the website. So if you or someone you know is doing or has done something noteworthy, please fill out the form so I can find you. I do only record in person, but I travel a lot, so there's a chance we might cross paths. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. And don't forget to check out those tours at wandertours.com. I wear a lot of hats, so as you can tell, you can find out a lot about me on all those different websites. If you'd like to connect with me, you can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. You can sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. We've got more than 2,500 members in that group. It's where we share goals, talk about our setbacks, and where you can find words of encouragement and inspiration from others. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.